Okay, so let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is, it's fundamentally different.
It really
It
is.
touches on something deeply personal, fraught with complexity, and, well, it requires enormous courage just to even address it. Navigating infidelity.
And all the monumental decisions that follow.
Exactly. You shared a really essential stack of sources with us, articles, relationship research, psychological notes. And our mission here, it isn't to provide a simple prescription.
Because that doesn't exist.
It doesn't. Instead, we're distilling the practical perspective on how to approach those crucial, often paralyzing choices. Whether to personally forgive the act, and then whether to relationally stay with the person.
It's a real tightrope walk, isn't it? Between your own personal trauma and the reality of the relationship.
Yeah.
The material we looked at really emphasizes that true healing requires prioritizing your internal well-being above all else.
Okay.
And that means making a very clear, critical distinction between the personal act of forgiveness, which is really an act of self-preservation, and the practical relational decision to stay or leave the partnership.
And what immediately jumps out, and I think all the sources agreed on this, is the core paradox. No relationship counselor, no friend, certainly not us, can tell you if you should forgive the act of betrayal. And yet, regardless of what happens to the relationship, you will have to find a way to forgive.
Yeah.
For yourself.
That's it right there. Forgiveness is framed here as an internal requirement for your own mental health, for your future happiness. It's not some gift you give to your partner.
Right.
It's a freedom you eventually grant to yourself. If you don't process it, you stay chained to the person and the trauma, even if you physically leave.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You are doing important work.
I think that initial insight is the hardest for people to grasp because it completely redefines the word.
It does.
When most people talk about forgiving infidelity, they aren't actually defining forgiveness at all. They're defining staying.
Yeah. Exactly. They equate it with just not leaving or, supposedly accepting the situation and then somehow just continuing on with life together. But the sources challenge that, and they challenge it deeply. They argue that merely staying is often just endurance. It's not genuine transformation.
So, okay, let's get specific then. What does the material define as true forgiveness? If it's not just this moment of sudden acceptance, what is it?
It's defined as an internal, really difficult journey. It takes tremendous conscious effort. It's not something that just descends upon you like a divine light switch.
But what does that look like day to day?
True forgiveness means choosing every single day not to use the betrayal as a weapon.
Wow, that sounds exhausting.
It is.
You're saying it requires actively committing to not bringing up the betrayal at every single argument, managing these inevitable surges of irritation and anger that are going to surface?
Even when you're fighting about something totally unrelated, that is the daily work, and the material is very, very candid about the timeline.
Not quick.
Not at all. This process is not linear. Until that initial trauma is truly processed and your self-esteem is rebuilt, which takes time, memories, fears, suspicions, they will continue to come up.
Right.
The betrayed person has to, for a period, just cope with these recurring waves of resentment and vulnerability.
I can just imagine the listener asking, okay, if this is so internal and so difficult, how do you even approach your partner about it? Because just saying, I forgive you on a Tuesday might lead to a complete eruption of pain by Thursday.
And that's where honesty is key. The sources strongly suggest being transparent with your partner about what this internal process is actually like.
So you tell them.
You might acknowledge that you're trying your best, that you're committed to the work of forgiveness, but you also have to be clear that this process, it's not going to happen in a day or a week or even a year. It takes as long as it takes. You start the process, but you cannot set a deadline on your own healing.
That shift from a fixed timeline to an open-ended process, that's actually quite freeing, isn't it? Even though it's hard.
It is. It means you acknowledge you have more control over your own healing actions than you do over anything your partner does.
Right.
And once that internal work is acknowledged, the focus inevitably shifts to the external landscape.
Yeah.
That huge decision, stay or leave.
Which brings us to the next part, looking at the two paths people commonly take. The sources talk about the overwhelming tendency for the betrayed partner to stay after the initial conflict. They enter what is starkly called a state of endurance.
Endurance is staying, yeah. But it's usually not for true relational reasons. It's almost always justified by this long list of external concerns that sound rational on the surface, but are just deeply rooted in fear.
And the sources laid those rationalizations out so clearly. You hear things like, the children need a complete family, or
That's the big one.
what will our friends or family think if we separate? Or that emotional dependency, I cannot live without them.
Or even just practical fears about getting older, future prospects, the fear of having to start all over again.
All of those are reasons to endure.
Yes, and the material defines the crucial difference here. Enduring means staying without achieving that true internal forgiveness.
So what happens then?
What happens is the betrayed partner begins to just torment themselves internally, constantly revisiting the betrayal, constantly seeking validation for their pain. And as one of the source articles put it, they end up simmering daily in a pot of toxic emotions and thoughts.
Oof, that phrase. It paints a really painful picture.
Yeah.
What does that simmering in toxic emotions actually look like in daily life?
Well, it shows up as passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, chronic anxiety.
Weaponizing the past.
Absolutely. You stay, but you don't rebuild. You use the betrayal as a shield or a hammer in every single conflict that comes up later. The relationship becomes this, negotiation based on guilt rather than a partnership based on renewed trust. And that toxic state just fundamentally prevents any real healing for either person.
So if the decision is made to stay, that state of enduring has to stop immediately. The relationship has to move from that toxic simmer to a state of committed rebuilding. What does that path look like?
If the decision is to stay, the sources are clear. A full commitment to radical change is necessary from both sides.
From both.
For the betrayed person, it means setting really clear boundaries, continuing that work on internal forgiveness, and deliberately shifting their focus away from the painful history and toward a future that they actively want to create.
And there's a really strong push in the material to make any decision, staying or leaving, rather than just lingering in that painful, decisionless limbo.
Indecision just prolongs the trauma. You have to move forward under new, explicitly discussed conditions.
And that ties us right into our next part, which requires challenging these really deeply held and often destructive beliefs.
To move out of endurance and into rebuilding, you often have to negotiate with your own internal rulebook.
This is the issue of refusing to forgive on principle. I think this resonates with a lot of people. It often comes from this ingrained idealistic view, the belief that betrayal is the ultimate sin, and so it must never, under any circumstances, be forgiven.
Well, that rigid adherence to principle raises a really important question. What happens when your principles, which you thought were designed to protect you, actually start to cause you suffering?
Right.
The sources analyze this pretty carefully. They note that doing something purely out of principle can sometimes be foolish if it just causes you great unnecessary pain.
Meaning the principle itself becomes a prison. So you're holding the moral high ground, but you're miserable and alone in it.
Exactly. Life has a way of breaking down our idealizations. If those rigid inner beliefs prevent you from looking at the situation from different angles, you might be prevented from making a decision that truly suits the reality of your life today.
So changing those principles is possible, but it requires, exploring different perspectives. Giving yourself permission to evolve past an earlier definition of right and wrong.
The goal, according to this material, isn't the decision itself. It's how you internally justify that decision to yourself. You have to make the choice that creates the least amount of inner conflict and allows you to return to harmony as quickly as possible. The choice that minimizes your long-term suffering is the one that serves you best.
Speaking of self-service and finding harmony, the sources identify a very constructive pattern when someone does choose to leave, actively focusing on their own life. Things like, improving their appearance, dating again, rediscovering long-lost interests.
This is a critical reaction. The period after a separation can, paradoxically, be a period of intense self-development. But the crucial distinction here is why the person is doing it.
Right.
This growth should be purely for one's own happiness and mental stability.
Not to prove anything to the former partner.
Absolutely not. If you're improving your life just to make your ex regret their decision, you're still letting them dictate your emotional energy. Growth for yourself, driven by genuine self-interest and happiness, that's the only truly worthy and sustainable goal here.
That brings us to the broader relationship context, because infidelity, it never happens in a vacuum, does it? It's always influenced by the state of the relationship beforehand.
What's fascinating here is how much the relationship's foundation matters in predicting recovery. So infidelity in a relationship that had a strong foundation, where there was still respect, mutual support, a deep connection, but one partner made a massive mistake, that's one situation.
Okay, but if the relationship was already struggling, characterized by emotional distance, a lack of understanding, no real support, And then the infidelity happens.
That is a completely different scenario. In that latter case, the infidelity might just be the symptom or, the final punctuation mark on a relationship that was already over. The sources suggest the likelihood of rebuilding successfully is much, much higher when a strong foundation existed before.
And regardless of that foundation, if you choose to stay, that internal battle for forgiveness is still crucial for your own survival. What are the long-term consequences if that internal wound just stays open?
Oh, they're profound. If the betrayed partner struggles to forgive for their own mental health and just constantly dwells on the past, this internal torment, it creates a breeding ground for psychological deterioration.
So we're talking about real health risks.
We're talking about genuine risks of chronic neurosis, depression, significant emotional breakdowns. Under those conditions, a healthy relationship simply can't be sustained. The individual is struggling just to maintain their own sense of wholeness.
So forgiveness is less about the partner and more about removing the cancer of resentment from your own system.
It is entirely an act of self-care. And if that forgiveness is achieved and the decision is made to rebuild, the sources are clear. This requires both people genuinely wanting it and actively participating in creating a new relationship.
What's the specific role for the unfaithful partner in all this, beyond just saying sorry?
Their responsibility is monumental. They have to work tirelessly to establish a new foundation of trust, often through radical, painful transparency, and they must compensate for the emotional damage over a sustained long period.
So this is not a week-long process.
Not at all. It means allowing the betrayed partner access and accountability when it's requested without getting defensive. It's a long-term commitment.
And there's a delicate balance here, right? The sources caution the betrayed partner against using this compensation as a form of, unending leverage.
Absolutely crucial. The material adds a really strong caveat here. The betrayed partner should take only as much compensation, in terms of transparency and effort, as is truly necessary for rebuilding trust.
Without using it as a weapon.
Exactly. Without using the situation as a means of manipulation or to inflict continued punishment, if the betrayed partner constantly shifts the goalposts or demands endless destructive penance, they're just creating an emotional hostage situation. That prevents the new relationship from ever truly taking root. The effort has to be about building a sincere, entirely new relationship.
That level of clarity on boundaries and roles is so vital for anyone trying to move forward. Okay, let's bring this all together and summarize the core conclusion.
The sources are crystal clear on the most sincere, universally applicable advice. Forgiveness is absolutely necessary for your self-interest and your well-being.
It's the essential tool.
It's the essential tool for maintaining your own wholeness and detaching your identity from the trauma that was inflicted on you.
But, and this is the critical separation we started with, forgiving does not mean staying together.
Not at all.
That external choice, whether to trust again, to reconcile, and to live a shared life, that is a decision only you can make after you've prioritized your own emotional safety.
And we have to highlight the profound warning in the material. The irony is that the worst option, the one that guarantees long-term misery for both people, is staying together and not truly forgiving.
And that's the most common choice.
Statistically, it is the most common choice people make. They confuse endurance with healing.
Before we close out this difficult topic, the sources offer a really good framework for self-care and self-reflection. You need to be kinder to yourself, stop the self-blame, and just take a necessary break to focus inward.
That self-focus starts with a few specific self-assessment questions. The sources advise asking these questions honestly, even if the answers are painful. First, what is happening to me right now? How am I feeling, truly?
Emily.
Second, am I even interested in myself? How interesting is my life to me when I remove this relationship from the spotlight? And perhaps most telling, what kind of relationship with myself and with a partner do I truly want going forward?
Answering those questions honestly, that's what provides the clarity you need to figure out if you can genuinely be happy in the current relationship or if your future lies somewhere else. It's a powerful set of tools.
It really is.
So we've covered the essential distinction, the internal decision to forgive for yourself versus the external decision of staying or leaving. I want to leave you with the ultimate warning from the source material, something to really mull over as you navigate this process of rebuilding your life. The worst betrayal is not when someone else betrays us. The worst betrayal is when we betray ourselves, when we choose to sacrifice our own inner harmony for the sake of external stability or fear or some rigid, outdated principle. Consider what choice truly honors your own life and your inner peace above all else. Thank you for sharing your sources for this deep dive.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to overcome betrayal, break toxic cycles, take control of your relationship choices, read How to Deal with a Love Triangle. The link is below the video.